thank you for that. Yo sé que mayormente se ha anhelado este momento bastante. Y yo sé que será un poquito raro empezar, seguir, comenzar por poquito tiempo en otro idioma, no es normal. Pero lo pienso bonito, que yo les puedo dar poquito de autenticidad, ¿sí? De cómo fuera allá, lo que hacíamos, como era, ¿sí? Si estaba visitando esta noche, como dice la canción, los hermanos de aquí nos gozamos en decir bienvenidos. Sabemos que hay muchas cosas que hacer allá en el mundo. Hay mucho que podrían estar haciendo, pero han elegido estar aquí, animando a los hermanos, alabando al Señor, a su Hijo, nuestro Salvador. Y eso es la cosa más importante que se puede hacer. Entonces, otra vez, decimos gracias y bienvenidos a todos. What on earth were you saying? All right. The way that went was mostly this, that I know it will be strange for us to begin a service in a different language because that's not normal. But I think the word is bonito. I think it's something beautiful, that I could give you a taste of authenticity. Because that is how it is over in Nicaragua. That is the 9 times out of the 11 days that Danny and I were preaching over there, that is largely how services began. Even today, that's probably how a service began in Nicaragua, with some of those exact same words. I think that's something beautiful about the whole idea or the concept of the interconnectedness of the church. That while we're doing something here, people thousands of miles away are largely probably doing the same thing at the same moment. And I think that's something exciting. So to those who are visiting this morning, we wish you a welcome. Or not this morning, this is the evening. To those who are visiting this evening, we say welcome. We know that there are a lot of things to be doing out in the world. There are a lot of things that you could be doing instead of being here right now, but you've chosen to be here. Encouraging me, encouraging the brethren here, and praising the Lord Jesus Christ. And that is obviously the most important thing that one could choose to do. That was the gist of all of that Spanish. So before we begin, I would again like to take kind of a personal note and say something that has been on my mind, on my heart recently. I certainly do appreciate all of the prayers and all of the kind words, all of those things, as I indicated to you this morning. But I would like for us to kind of keep this in context. This is not about me. All of this, what you're about to see, maybe not necessarily that, but all of this, what you're about to see, I was privileged to go and do this. I benefited more than really anyone as a part of the trip, except for perhaps Danny and those in Nicaragua. I gained more from this than probably the rest. This is about the work of God. This is about the work of the Lord in a different country and what the Lord is doing over there. That is the purpose of this, and that is where I would like to kind of keep the focus. So let's just keep that in perspective tonight. Thank you again for your attendance, for your attention this evening. Shall we begin? So Nicaragua 2015, here in Danville, Indiana. That is me. I'm going to do a lot of this. I've never really used PowerPoint quite so extensively, so this will be an adventure for all of us. That's me on the airplane, and then right there with Danny, I caught him unawares. That's the airport in Managua. And then this was our gracious host. This is Oswaldo Antonio Parrales Moreno. He is a faithful gospel preacher in Managua. He does a lot of traveling in the surrounding areas. He took us to most of the places that he goes. You'll see that on a map in just a couple of slides. He does some of the most traveling that I've ever seen or ever heard of a gospel preacher doing, to go and to encourage congregations to stay faithful in the area of Managua. Oswaldo actually had a back surgery, and they put a pin in the top of his, in the top of his spine and in the bottom of his spine. And it actually did him very little good. So when he does all of that traveling, sitting in a 1990 Toyota, he sits in incredible pain. He's in a lot of pain. He was actually in the hospital a couple of days ago with so much back pain. So there are people that sacrifice a whole lot even their physical well-being, to go and to travel, to do the work of the Lord. That's not something uncommon in other countries either. So where in the world are we talking about? This right here on the left is a map of the Americas. That's the United States up top, and then Mexico, and then Central America connects Mexico to South America. Zoom in to Central America. This is Nicaragua, right in the center, below Honduras, above Costa Rica. A larger map of Nicaragua. This is where we were, and now I'm going to show you where we went. That was home base in Managua. Managua, there are various churches that we attended or that we traveled to. I was in Managua approximately 6 days with Danny. While we were in Managua, we stayed in Oswaldo's home with him and his family. And while I was in Managua, I preached approximately 4 times. So we landed in Managua evening 1, or the first night, and then we traveled up to Tonala. Tonala, there was a church of about 35 members. We stayed a day and a half, and I preached once while we were up there. We then traveled down, made a day trip to Leon. Leon is the hottest place in Nicaragua. And while we were there, we stayed in a building that was essentially an oven, because it was basically brick on the ground, and then brick on the walls, and then brick as a ceiling, and brick on the other wall. Which, if you're familiar with the characteristics of old-timey ovens, then that's pretty much what that is. So that was very fun, but we did stay one day there, preached there that evening, and then traveled back to Managua. We then formed the other half of Angel Wings, as I would like to call them, and traveled up to a place called Jucuapa. Hello. There it is. Jucuapa is up in the mountains. It's in the mountains of Nicaragua, and that was a very nice break from the heat of the city. The city is right there near Leon. That's where it's exceptionally hot. But we went up to Jucuapa. It's a mountainous area, and stayed there for a day, preached one time. Came down to a place called Cebaco. And Cebaco is a tiny little pueblo. It's a little village. It's off of a highway, largely dirt roads. People live there, people walk everywhere that they go. There's a church in Cebaco of about 20 members. For the 2 days that we were in this sort of area, I preached once up in Jucuapa and then once in Cebaco. We came back to Managua, stayed a couple of days in Managua, did some preaching, and one day of just kind of relaxation from all of the traveling. And then we went to Messiah. And Messiah has a church of about 30 members. We stayed a day, preached that evening, and then came back to Managua for the last day of the trip. So how did we get around? How did we get around? That is a 1990 Toyota something with a cab about that big, not made for anybody over 5'5". And I rode in the back behind Danny, who was not a short person. And I got to tell you something about traveling in Nicaragua, or at least I'm assuming it's largely the same in other foreign countries. There are a lot of dirt roads, and when it rains, people still have to travel on those dirt roads, which makes what? It makes ruts in the road. So driving along in a cab about this big, not made for anybody over 5'5", going probably 20 or so miles an hour, we hit those ruts pretty hard. And I don't know if any of you know what the little handle up here to hold on to is called, but when you hit a rut and you bounce, probably the last thing that you want to hit your head on is that thing up there. But that's exactly what happened most of the time that we were traveling. So a pretty uncomfortable means of travel for most of the way that we were doing things. Other examples of how things are in Nicaragua, people do have cars. If they don't have cars, they'll travel on bikes like this gentleman here. But there's an example of just kind of the back of the Toyota truck. That car looked like most of the ones that we would have seen on the road down there. And then, okay, up here on the left, when we went up to Jucuapa, which was on the right side of the Angel Wings, up into the mountains, 14 of us packed into that van and went up 2 hours into the mountains. So imagine being in a van with 14 people. How that smells, how that feels, all of those bumps. Just, yeah, you can imagine. And then, kind of in keeping with the means of travel, it's not uncommon to see, herds of cattle or various animals on the road as you travel, as demonstrated. So living conditions, what was it like? I talked to Danny about this, and when he warned me before about some of the things that we would see in Nicaragua, for him, it was a very biblical injunction. It wasn't just, hey, we could go stay in a hotel, but we're going to just choose to go live with people in their, in the poverty of that third world country and their conditions. For Danny, it was biblical. 1 Corinthians 9, 19 through 23, I see that some of you have already read it, but for though I am free of all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win the Jews. To those who are under the law, as those under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, I became as without law, though not being without law towards God, but under law towards Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I have become weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. To Danny, that was important. Becoming all things to all men means that when I preach to you about staying faithful regardless of your conditions, or when I preach to you about staying faithful to the Lord no matter what life sends your way, if I'm preaching that from a place of a shower with hot water, or a bed that is not made out of wood, or a bed that's very comfortable, or things like that, then it doesn't necessarily carry the same clout. Not that it's any less true, but it doesn't weigh the same as it would if I had gone and stayed with you in those places. So for Danny, that's really what that was about. And then the last verse, now I do this for the gospel's sake, that I might be a partaker of it with you. And we really did partake in that gospel, in that idea with those people as we lived with them down there. So this is an example of some of the nicer houses in Nicaragua. Oswaldo, our host, lives in a government-funded, what would be the equivalent of the projects. So the government is building about 5,000 houses on this big stretch of plain in Nicaragua. So Oswaldo does have, because it's government-funded, he has running water, electricity, they had Wi-Fi, things like that. But as you can see, the houses aren't incredibly big, it's just several walls and then that tin copper roof. And there are thousands of those houses in the area that Oswaldo lives in. That's what it looked like on the inside. So cinder block walls, that's the living room. They had a couch and a place to cook over a fire. The bathroom, shower with the curtain that pulls, and not necessarily a shower head, but a little spigot where water would come out from the walls. And then that's the backyard. Imagine that being your backyard. Imagine that being how you grow up, where you play with your friends or things like that. Just an enclosed cinder block area with a concrete floor. Clothes hanging, you can see the picture. That's how it is, and that's nicer for most of the areas. That's privileged living, but that is the house that we stayed in for 6 days while we were down there, the house of Oswaldo and his family. So the first day that we were down there, we went to Tanala, and this is a place where we ate in Tanala. It was formerly a horse stable turned house, and that is indeed where people live. It's just kind of this open area, and then on the two sides are where horses would have stayed, and those are the bedrooms. That's the backyard, and that's a pretty typical backyard. So dirt floors, the clothes that hang, and then it would be off to the right here, under sort of a lean-to coming out of the back of the house is the area to cook, and they cook over a real fire. That's the room that we stayed in, and those beds, I don't know if you can see, that's a blanket that covers the bed, this part right here, but underneath that is no mattress. That's just wood, and that's what I slept on, and that's what Oswaldo slept on beside me. Just a wood bed, no mattress. Which, as a spoiled kid, I'm going to say it multiple times tonight, as a spoiled kid from the city, that's kind of a culture shock. All right, having to sleep on a wood bed, not super comfortable. You wake up in the morning and, not exactly all sunshine and rainbows. That was super nice. So was that. That's a toilet. That is a toilet. It was hewn out of the ground, so it was formerly a mound of stone, and someone cut it down into a little 2 by 2 by 2 stone block with a hole in the top, as you can see. And then underneath, there's just a big pit. And you can imagine, 1, how that smelled. 2, you can see what it looked like. And 3, you can imagine having to go and use something like that. Maybe not what you would be most inclined to do. But those are conditions of Tanala, of the way that those people live down there. Well, oops. That is my living condition. When we would travel, I would often sleep, just kind of roll down the windows and to kind of avoid some of the uncomfortability, just conk out for about 2 hours. We next went to Jucuapa. This is the mountainous area, and it was pretty rural. felt great, but again, there's the van that we traveled in, and then that's sort of the landscape of that area. That's someone's house, and it's also a building of meetings. It's in kind of a plain area before you get to the mountains, but wood for burning fire, for providing heat, providing a source to cook on. And then this area right here, the copper that kind of juts off to the right, to the left, that's the kitchen area. And it's open. Animals just kind of wander to and from, but that is where the church at Pukwapa meets, and also where a family there lives. That's what it looks like on the inside. Open area, just a dirt floor and a copper backing, and then that's on your left, that's the toilet. Sort of an outhouse looking thing, a little bit nicer than the stone hole in the ground, but not necessarily the nicest of conditions. As I mentioned, animals kind of wander to and from, and I know I've told some of you this story. That chicken there on the screen, it was the first time anything like this had ever really happened to me, but I was preaching in the house, and I kind of stepped like this to make a point, and that chicken just walked right between my legs. Just kind of, he was minding his own business. Nobody else really paid a whole lot of attention to it, but I almost lost my composure, because that just wasn't something that I was accustomed to. That wasn't anything that had ever really happened to me before. So that was interesting. And then the dog there on the screen, there are, I would say, approximately 4 billion dogs that walk around the streets of Nicaragua, of Managua. And all of the dogs are this thin. And they all look like scrappy stray dogs. And it would be kind of scary, but they don't really have the energy or the means to attack you or anything like that. They just kind of wander around sadly, looking for food or trash to eat. But that was the one dog that I did see that was not like that, so I took a picture of him. I don't remember his name. We then went 2 hours back down the mountain to a village called Sebaco. And this was the house that I stayed in. It was the house of a lady called Maria, her daughter Hazel, and Hazel's brother Carlitos. It's in a pueblo, which is a little village. They have dirt roads or dirt streets, and houses just line the streets. There really aren't a whole lot of restaurants, anything else, just houses that look almost exactly like that. This is the bathroom at the place called Sebaco. It was in not necessarily this blue house, but in a different house where Danny slept. That's the bathroom, and then following that, this is the shower. And when I did the presentation at camp, you'll remember this, but for those of you who weren't there, this is a picture that will forever impact me. Because for me, it was the lowest point in the trip. This place in Sebaco only gets running water, it's like 4 or 6 hours out of the day. So for the rest of the time, they have to run the spigot and fill up a 20-gallon drum so that they can have water for the rest of the time until the water turns back on. So when I went to take a shower that night, it was not within the time that they had running water. So I was given a 5-gallon bucket to go into this 4x4 prison cell, is what it felt like, and take a bucket bath. I hadn't showered the 2 days preceding this. We were far away from home base, and I was very far away from home base. I wasn't homesick, but I had been thinking a little bit about my family and how things are doing. I hadn't talked to them in a while, things like that. And there's something about splashing water out of a bucket onto yourself. Just standing in an infested, bug-ridden cell made of cinder block that just makes you feel primal and feral, and it's not what I was accustomed to. And I had to step back and realize, what is the purpose of this? What are we here for? Am I here to be comfortable? Am I here to take showers with hot and cold water, or to change the temperature in my shower? Or have water that runs out of a shower head? This is how these people live all of the time. When these people want to take a shower and they don't have running water, they got to do that. Take a shower out of a bucket. So for me, it was kind of the lowest point emotionally, but it was the turning point for me to really realize that this is how it is in a lot of other places. And it's not about me or my comfort. This is about doing God's work. That's what was important throughout there. So the next day, we traveled back to Managua. Actually, I want to pause right here. Most of you heard that I got sick while I was down there. And so that night that I took that shower was also the night that I drank the water that made me sick. And then the next day, when I woke up by morning time, I was pretty much done for. Traveling back to Managua, and then we arrived in Managua to do a Bible study in the neighborhood. And it was that night, and then the day after that I couldn't preach because I was so sick. The water there is untreated. There are a lot of bacteria that, again, spoiled white kids from the city, that our stomachs are not accustomed to. And I really only just brushed my teeth in the water and kind of drank the little bit that was left in the cup after that. And that was enough to just to put me on the ground for a couple of days and give some uncomfort the following days. But that is, as far as time period goes, about halfway through the trip. That's when all of that happened. That was pretty rough. But we went back to Managua, and the following days or the days after that, I preached, and then we went to this house for lunch. It's the house of a lady called Gioconda. That is her house, and then her backyard followed there. Again, pretty consistent with that theme of landscape of just dirt floors, or dirt floors run from backyard to house. It's the same area, and then clothes that are strung up to dry. We traveled then to the middle of Managua, to a neighborhood called Altagracia, and we ate with people in the picture that looks like jail cells. Those are the doors to their bedroom. You walk in, and then the jail cells kind of form your wall. They run a tire business, so welding and things like that, out of their home, and then they live right there in their business. And those are their bedrooms. And then later that night, we would have preached and gone to the house of these particular people, Edwin and Evelyn Palma. Edwin is another faithful gospel preacher down there in Nicaragua. Edwin is actually coming to Miami. It's funny. It's huge when anybody down there gets to come up here. It's the end and the beginning of everything, because we get to go over there to the United States. But Edwin is coming up to Miami to preach for, I believe, 15 days on the 14th of August, and he's leaving his family, his wife and 2 kids, there behind in Nicaragua. And then that was the bathroom. That is not a noose up there hanging from the ceiling. That's the way to flush the toilet, and then the spigot that runs up the wall as a shower. Not a noose. And then that is actually super interesting. Managua, so the 6 days that we were in Managua, we literally drove around in the shadow of an active volcano. And I don't know if you can tell, but this right here, I keep pointing like you can see me pointing, but this right here, that's all smoke, which means that the active volcano is smoking. That's fun. Driving around, you never know, if it's gonna blow up on you and things like that. But the land out here, like there's from about 30 or 40 years ago when it last exploded, there's about a 2-mile radius of just badland and volcanic rock. We stepped off, we were driving along one day and stepped off the highway and went past those trees that you see right there in the front and took pictures of the volcano and everything like that. That was pretty interesting. So, moving on. La gente. La gente means the people. So the people there in Nicaragua. I was flipping through and reading, and I came across this verse that sort of impacted me, or I thought it fitting. Ephesians 2:19-22. Now therefore you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and the members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building, being fitted together, grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are being built together for a dwelling place of God in the Spirit. I especially like verse 19. Now therefore you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. Brothers and sisters here in Danville, or Greenwood, or Eastside, or wherever you are from, these people that you are about to see in the slides, this is your family. These are your brothers and sisters in Christ. They love you. They talk about you all of the time. They want to know how you are. They greet you from Nicaragua. I hope that makes you want to smile, knowing that you have people in a different country who genuinely care about your well-being, and who, if you ever found yourself, for whatever reason, in Cebaco, Nicaragua, would give no hesitation to be hospitable towards you. That's Martini. He's cute. He was in Tenala. He was one of the kids that was most fascinated by Danny's ability to do some basic magic tricks. He just could not get his head around some of the things that Danny was doing, but it was very cute. Once again, this is Oswaldo, and then this is a preacher that does similar traveling. His name is Mario Moreno, and Mario travels around from Tonala in that first area to I guess about 2 hours away each Sunday to go and to preach and to edify the churches. But Mario was a very faithful brother, faithful gospel preacher doing some very good work there in Nicaragua. And then the lady, her name was Filomena, and Filomena came up to about right here on me. She was 77. She was very cute. It was her house that we stayed in. She was the one that fed us. Very sweet lady. The elderly lady that I'm seen there with, that is Romacia. She was the one who lived in the horse stable, or the horse barn. That was her house. And then her daughter right there pictured. I don't remember her name. That's probably bad. Right here are pictured 4 gospel preachers. This is Harvey Chavarria. You can't see the dot, but he's the one on the far right. Maximo Duarte. That's Oswaldo, our host. And then on the left is Orlando Somoto. And they were all given, when we went to Sabaco and up into the mountainous regions, Oswaldo brought from Bill Reeves, who's a pretty popular or famous gospel preacher. Oswaldo brought this box of just materials from Bill, because specifically the gentleman on the left, Orlando Somoto, Orlando deals with a lot of liberalism in the area that he preaches. He deals with a lot of Pentecostal and Presbyterian kind of those things. Those are pretty prevalent in the area where he is at, and he deals with a lot of that, kind of trying to combat it and say that, no, this is not truth. This is truth, or what I'm telling to you is truth. So Oswaldo brought specifically for him, but also for the others, a big box of Bill Reeves material on a lot of those kinds of subjects, and gave those to him. So there is Hazel on your left. It was her house, the small blue house that I stayed in. And then on the right is a family that we ate dinner with. The girl pictured in the blue actually speaks English, so she was pretty excited to have somebody else who spoke English in her home. Those are some of the youth pictured there. This is Hazel again. This is Alfredo, and then Miguel pictured there on your left, in front of the van that we traveled in. This is Carlitos. These are the 2 people who had the little blue house that I showed you. It was their house that I stayed in Sabaco. Carlitos is 9, and then this is Maria. She's 43. It's her home that we stayed in. Gioconda, and then her grandson, Giovanni. Giovanni never smiled one time in the 2 days that I was with him. He just kind of made that same face the whole time, never changed. And then probably the cutest of all of the people all of the children that we met there, those 3 young ladies, their names elude me at the moment, but standing in front of one of the vendors that we ate at before a service. So finally, or last, El trabajo del Señor means the work of the Lord. So, what's important? Now I would remind you, brothers, of the gospel that I preached to you, which you received in which you stand, and by which you are being saved, if you hold fast to the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance that which I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, he was raised on the 3rd day in accordance with the Scriptures. Folks, no matter where you go, that does not change. That is divine truth. That is something that rings true throughout the ages, throughout the nations, throughout the world. That's something beautiful. That the same message, the same words, no matter what language, they're the same here as they are there. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace towards me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me. Whether then it was I or they, so we preach, and so you believed. So indeed it was me and Danny that preached, and they that believed there in Nicaragua. That's me the first night at Tonala. I was a little more nervous than I usually get. To do preaching all in Spanish, it was sort of like you heard at the beginning of our study or our presentation this evening, but for an hour. Bible studies would typically last 2 hours. I would preach for the first hour, and then Danny for the second, or vice versa. Sometimes they would start at 5, so go 5 to 7, and then sometimes 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. But over there, 9 p.m. is our 11 p.m. So we'd lose 2 hours, gain 2 hours or whatever. So me starting to preach at 9 p.m., I feel like it's 11 p.m. and I'm ready to go to bed. So then by the time 11 p.m. hits, it's like 1 in the morning, at least that's what it feels like in here. And then we have to drive an hour, 2 hours and go home or something. And that was pretty rough. It was pretty interesting. But you get used to it as time goes on. Those are the brethren there in Sebaco, or not in Sebaco, in Tonala, the first place that we went while we were down there. That happened in Tonala. A pretty interesting story. That young man, his name is Fernando. He's 15. And he's been friends with Oswaldo, with our host, for quite a while. So before the study started, about 4:30, I got into a discussion with Fernando about baptism, because I had heard that he hadn't been baptized, but he had grown up hearing all these things. He just hadn't taken that important step. And I was asking him why and talking to him about it a little bit. And then Oswaldo came over. We talked to him a little more before the study. And it grew to this point where Oswaldo was literally shedding tears because he was so passionate about Fernando, about his soul, caring for those things. And still Fernando, he really didn't want to. He wasn't very accepting of the things that we were saying. But the whole time that we were talking to him, he was sitting on the ledge of that thing. We were in that very same spot. And he was sitting there and he was picking out a nail on his finger. And by the time that we had finished talking to him, by the time it was time for the study to start at 5, he had almost completely picked that nail off of his finger. And I drew his attention to that. I said, you have almost completely picked a nail off of your finger. You're causing yourself harm. There is something within you that is responding to what we're saying. You know what you got to do. Why are you not? I asked him the same question as in Acts. What hinders you from being baptized? What is holding you back? And he said, whatever. So we told, fine, wait. After the study, if you want to do this, if this is still something that is important to you, then we can take care of it. And it took him about 5 minutes by the time we had sat down for the study and it was about to begin. He leaned over to me and said, I want to be baptized. So we went ahead and took care of that. He was baptized into Jesus Christ for the remission of his sins. There's him going down, Danny aiding with that, and then him as he comes up. What a blessing that each of us have a new brother in Christ. I'm thankful for that. And that was something very moving and emotional to see. That is Danny and I in Lyon, in that exceptionally hot place, preaching that evening. There up in the mountains, that is the shack-looking place, right here on the left. That's up in the mountains in Huquapa, and then we would have come down 2 hours into Sebaco, and I forgot to give my camera to the person sitting in the front row. I realized in the middle of my sermon that I wouldn't have a picture taken of that. But I had taken, before that, a picture of the meeting place. So that is where we would have done that. They got rid of the rocking chairs, and put plastic folding chairs up in a podium. And that was where we met in Sebaco. This was the day that I was very sick, but that's a place called Camilla Ortega. It's a neighborhood right in the middle of Managua, in the middle of the city, and just only Danny preached that evening for an hour. Those are the brethren there. So this is Danny looking out at those people. About 25 or 30 in all, there in that neighborhood. This is us at Villa Miguel, which is Oswaldo's home congregation, near his home in Managua. That's Danny preaching, and then again, I didn't give someone my camera. Actually, I did, but the pictures that they took were so blurry that it couldn't be made out, so I just used one that I took, kind of a selfie with the rest of the people that weren't paying attention, there in Villa Miguel. That also is an incredibly hot place, and it's their fault. They don't understand. Common sense is just kind of cast off to the side here in this place. You can't really see it from the picture, but if I were to have taken a picture of the whole room like this, you would see that there's a baptistry in the corner up by where Danny's standing. It'd be off to Danny's right. And the baptistry it's a good size, but it's uncovered. So with all of the heat from the outside that comes in and heats up the building, all of the humidity from the water in the baptistry just rises up, and it makes that place 400 degrees in the church building. And we need air conditioning, we need different fans, we need all of these kinds of things. Just cover the baptistry. It was really simple. We tried to get it across to them. They still didn't understand, still wouldn't listen to us. But that place was just incredibly hot. As you can see, that lady, she goes there every Sunday and she has to bring a water bottle to church because it's so hot. Ridiculous. And then that's in Altagracia. It's a different neighborhood in the middle of Managua. That's me preaching there. I believe, yes, that as well as Altagracia. We were there 2 nights. I preached 3 times, once on Sunday or twice on Sunday, and then once on, I believe, a Tuesday night there in Altagracia. Those are all of those people kind of packed in for one picture. And that's Tony. Tony has a unique and a beautiful story. Tony's from Los Angeles. He grew up speaking both English and Spanish. So he was one of the other people, one of the few times that I switched and indulged in English with him, because he was just beside himself excited to have somebody to speak English with, because he hears none of it. But Tony grew up in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles discipline system, or the penal system, gives you 3 tries. So whatever you've been doing, if it's drugs, if it's weapons, whatever, you have 3 tries to get it right, and then you're gone. You're away to a penitentiary or something like that for likely the rest of your life, depending on what you do. Tony was on his 2nd try. He was on his 2nd try. It was drugs that Tony got involved with. Not necessarily a gang, but just moving drugs. When he decided to move down to Nicaragua and stay with his mom to avoid that environment, to avoid that situation. He wasn't fleeing from punishment. He was, he had his rights and everything like that. But he moved down to avoid kind of that environment and everything. He got a job down there, pretty decent job, and every day he would walk past the house of a family that goes here at Altagracia. The family is actually standing back here to the back. The boy, you can't really see it because the red dot's not very powerful, but on the left there's a boy standing in a red shirt clutching his bag. It's the family of this boy. Every day Tony would walk past their home, and that boy would be sitting on the front porch, and he would call to Tony. He would say, "Tony, what's up, man?" And they would sit and talk just for a while on Tony's way home from work. And that boy would talk to Tony about the gospel. And he would tell him, "Hey, we go to church up at Altagracia. We'd really like it if you would come and join us." Tony said, No, man, church is not for me, no way. He said, and the boy would ask him, he would say, "Tony, aren't you afraid of what happens after you die? Doesn't that scare you? Don't you think about that?" And Tony, he shoved it off, and for a while he wouldn't stop and he wouldn't talk with that family or with that boy. But then he really started thinking about, I am kind of scared of what happens after I die. I really don't know. So he would come back and he would talk more, and they studied. And it ended up that Tony was converted and he was baptized last August. So interesting story of the way that God works, through people, through other people, even in different countries or no matter where that you are. And then that was the last place that we were at, the last night of our trip, in a place called Messiah. They just meet in a front patio. Someone has a house, and then there's a tiled patio area, and that is where they meet, as pictured there. Signs and wonders. Signs and wonders from Nicaragua. Get ready. No, literal signs and literal wonders. This is the sign from the church at Tanala. It reads, "Here meet the members of the Iglesia of Christ, the Church of Christ." Romans 16:16, Galatians 1:2, and then it says days of meeting. They meet on Saturday from 4 to 5 and Sunday from 9 to 11. Everyone is welcome. That's what it says there at the bottom. And that is displayed above their meeting building. Aseo de local means it's basically the list for the rules of cleaning the building. And that sign was on one of the last places that we were at. It was on the door inside the bathroom. So if you shut the bathroom door, you're looking at that sign. And you can see there's that little bubble area. I thought this was interesting when I read it. So I zoomed in. It says, "Ir al baño es solo para casos de emergencia. Por enfermedad no debe ser un costumbre. Debemos venir ya preparados desde nuestras casas." Which means, going to the bathroom is only for cases of emergency, if you are sick. It should not be a custom. We should come already prepared from our houses. Amen. Amen indeed. How interesting is that? Here we have problems with people who can't control, not that it's, obviously there are cases where you need to go to the bathroom, but here people will get up during a sermon and distract everyone as they walk past and go back to the bathroom, and that doesn't change no matter where you go. And they make it a point to say that ought not be a custom. We have reverence in this house. We're here not to distract others or to go to the back and see your friends or to go to the bathroom, things like that. You can wait long enough to worship the Lord. What's important here? I thought it was interesting just that they would put that on the door. It reminded me of home. And then this sign was hand-painted on the wall at Altagracia. It says, Christians should meet as a church, Hebrews 10:25, pray without ceasing, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, sing from the heart, Ephesians 5:19 and 20, celebrate or observe the supper of the Lord on Sundays, Acts chapter 20 and verse 7. Listen with attention to the word of God, Hebrews 20 and 7, and give offering on Sundays, 1 Corinthians 16, 1 through 2. And then at the bottom is quoted John chapter 14 and verse 15, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. I want to draw attention to 1, 2, 3, the third one down, to cantar con el corazón, sing from the heart. I don't say that it's neither here nor there. It's neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's just an observation. Here, typically in church services, we will worry about, not necessarily worry, but we will pay attention to the quality of singing. So our altos singing their part, or our tenors hitting that high note, or our basses really, carrying people and leading. That's important to us. They're not so much. They have songs that are actually translated and have the same tone, as we'll see in just a moment, have the same tone as some of the English songs, but they don't have the musical notes. They don't have all of that. It's just one tone and then the words. So you can imagine 35 or 40 people singing a song, the same tone. It's not really important how it sounds. The quality of singing isn't super prevalent. It's not pressing. It's singing from the heart. Those people sing from the heart, not in a disorderly way. I don't say at the top of their voice in like a disorderly or a distracting, obnoxious way, but they sing at the top of their voice, with sound supported, because it's worship. That's worship to them, and it was something that stuck out to me as a little bit different, or something that we could really emulate, that Christians could use, is that idea of literally singing from the heart, or singing with your heart, as an act of worship to the God. Is something that was important to them that drew my attention. And then this is kind of the wonder half of Signs and Wonders. This just caused me to think a little bit. These are examples of songs, like I mentioned, that were translated from English to Spanish, and that they would sing the same tune during the service. On the left is Send the Light. And then on the right, Yo tengo gozo means I have the joy. It's I have the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. They have that same song. They sing that same VBS song in some of their worship services. 306, God is love. God is love. That same song. And then 326, I thought of you. It's Victory in Jesus. Victory in Jesus. They sing that same one. 231 is God will take care of you. And then 90, When we walk with the Lord. An oldie but a goodie. 63, Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. 71, Holy, holy, holy. Santo, santo, santo. So what do we learn from all of this? This has been, I don't know if you've noticed, this is like a 65 slide PowerPoint. Chase takes way too many pictures when he goes overseas. First of all, appreciation. Appreciation. And it's cliche of people who travel to say this, but like JR said, I've expressed to him that I truly do understand, one, what it means to be an American. I am genuinely proud to be American after having traveled over there and seen the way that third world countries live. We are incredibly blessed. But even as Christians, we are incredibly blessed, no matter where you live. 1 Thessalonians 5, 16 through 18, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. That's a pretty popular, common verse. People can, even people in the world can typically quote at least one part of that. But rejoice always. Sometimes those people have nothing. Sometimes those people don't know where food is going to come from, but they rejoice always. Those are some of the poorest people that I've ever met, but they are some of the happiest people that I have ever met. They have joy, they are content, they rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. Always letting your life be a prayer, and in everything giving thanks. Giving thanks for, even if I have very little or even if I have nothing, giving thanks for what I do have. That's important to Christians and to the Lord. Psalms chapter 34 and verse 8. Psalms 34 and verse 8, excuse me. You don't necessarily have to turn there if you don't like. I can read them to you. Psalm 34 and verse 8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. How blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. How blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Not how blessed is the man who has a shower with running water, but how blessed is the man who takes refuge in the Lord. And then Psalm 104 and verse 4. It's not as directly related, but it came to my mind the way that God cares for those who do take refuge in him. The way that God watches over those who care for him. Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great, clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with light as a cloak, stretching out heaven like a tent curtain. He lays the beams of his upper chamber in the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot. He walks upon the wings of the wind, and he makes his winds his messengers, flaming fire his ministers. He establishes the earth upon its foundations, so that it will not totter forever and ever. No matter what the condition of man is, whether I'm poor, whether I'm rich, whether I'm big, whether I'm small, this is the world. This is our Father's world. He has created all of this. When I take refuge in him, the Creator, then I find comfort. Then I am rich spiritually. And that was something important to me, appreciating that while I was down there. Making your moments count. JR preached a sermon before I went over there, and I found myself repeatedly coming back to Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 16. 15 says, "Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil." And of course, that key phrase, making the most of your time. You saw from the chart, or from the map at the beginning, that we really weren't in those areas for a whole lot of time. 2 days at the most, or 2.5 days was really the longest that we would have stayed with people in a village. The purpose of a preaching trip is, of course, to preach. But we find ourselves a lot of times, Danny and I found ourselves a lot of times, with people in their homes, people that had questions about spiritual things. And when you're not with someone for a whole lot of time, and you find that that person is a spiritually minded person, or that person really cares about spiritual matters, you have to form a bond pretty quickly, within the span of a day, so that you can talk about some of the most intimate, some of the most important things. Some of the most important things that you could ever talk about with anybody. But if there's going to be mutual understanding, if you're going to really connect with somebody, you have to form a bond pretty quickly. Tell them things that are important. Forego superficiality, things that don't really matter, or things that aren't important to talk about, and start talking about what's important. I would offer that that's pretty important for us today, that we could learn something from that. We do a whole lot of superficial things, right? Talking to people, hey, how are you? I don't really care how you are. It doesn't matter. You could tell me, hey, I'm really bad, and I'm probably already walking this way looking at this. I wouldn't even notice. Why? Why am I that way? Why do I do that? Why can't I forego that? Pop the bubble. Maybe just once a day. Actually connect with somebody. Talk to somebody about something important. When I say something important, talk to somebody about what's important, about their spiritual life. That's what these people care about. That's what they wanted, what they craved. And it was up to us to kind of form those bonds. And I think we could benefit from that a little bit. Also, I've never had to say hello, to meet, and then say goodbye so quickly. We made a lot of good memories with people while we were down there. Met a lot of good people, did a lot of fun things, a lot of good things. Goodbye is something hard to do. When you do form that bond so quickly, I don't want to break that. I don't want to not see you for a year or 2 years or however long it will be. Hopefully not that long. But I don't want to say goodbye. So what do? I make my moment count. While we have this moment to say goodbye, let's again go beyond something superficial. Say goodbye while the memories are fresh. And I would encourage you with that this evening. Maybe not necessarily in the context of goodbye, but there are a lot of people here who have had profound impacts on other people here. So if someone here tonight has had a profound impact on you, someone here has said something that has caused you to think or caused you to change, I would encourage you, go to that person tonight and tell them thank you. While that memory is still fresh in your mind, while you're thinking about that, go to them and say thank you. Tell them what it means. Encourage them. Tell them something that matters. Talk to them about something important. And the last thing would be to know that God works. Going to a foreign country can be a little bit intimidating, right? It's hard to send your baby to a foreign country. It's hard to go to a foreign country because you don't know what's going to happen. My uncle kind of put it, he's here tonight, he put it in kind of a scary way that really didn't help me at all. ISIS is everywhere. That was super awesome to be thinking about. You know, before I go get on a plane, ISIS is everywhere. But genuinely, you never know what's going to happen. Joshua 1 and verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Wherever you go. Even if you're going somewhere where ISIS is. Even if you're going somewhere where it's perhaps dangerous. Or where there are neighborhoods that maybe you should not be. Maybe people who are hostile to the spreading of the gospel or the gospel in general. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous, and do not be frightened nor dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you. He is indeed with you. He was indeed with me and with Danny. It was obvious. We saw that. And it's something blessed to be able to take comfort in that. But then the other verse probably impacted me the most while I was down there. I was flipping through one evening after having stayed in Tanala, which was the first place that we went. And that was, I would say, largely the poorest place where we were in. It was the one with the square toilet, and that was, that's how it is for mostly everybody in that village. People live in the horse stables. People don't have adequate structural support for their houses, so it's kind of run down, it's collapsed, whatever. Sometimes those people are the ones that don't know where the rice and beans are coming from, because that's pretty much all they eat. They don't know where the next bag of rice is, or how I'm gonna pay, how I'm gonna get the Cordobas to buy this bag of rice and beans. That's a genuine question for a lot of people. And then even when we were in the city, we saw a lot of poverty. Nicaragua, actually the city of Managua, is really only made to house about probably 3,500 people, I would say. I think is what Danny said. And there's about 4,500 people in the city itself. So there are a lot of just house on house on house, and it's packed. It looks like houses are on top of houses. Things are ramshackle, running down. These people are poor. It is poverty. And there are a lot of worldly people outside of Jesus, who are the very same, who don't know where the rice and beans are coming from, who don't know where the food is coming from. I was thinking all of those thoughts. I was observing that, I was noting that. And then I was flipping through and came across Psalm chapter 37. And in verse 25. It sent chills up my back. And I've read it since then, and it still kind of does. Psalm 37 and verse 25. I've been young, and now I am old. Yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. There are a lot of poor people in Nicaragua, but they're not Christians. God watches out for those who take refuge in him. How blessed are those who take refuge in the Lord. That was the first time I had ever really seen that. Because here, it's easy, right? God will provide for you. Hear that in the sermon. Okay, but I still got 401k. I still go to Laha for lunch every Sunday. I don't have to worry about that. Over there, God will provide. All right, what does that mean? How am I going to get rice and beans? How am I going to get what I need? How will God provide for me? They got to trust that. Have to trust that the Lord will provide. But it's the coolest thing is when you see the two-way street. That yes, I have to trust that God will provide for me, but yes, God does provide. Yes, God watches out for those who care for him, those who trust in him. That's something just incredibly beautiful to see. And that was the plane ride back. That's us over Cuba, flying back in close to Florida. So I appreciate this evening your attention to the things that I've told you about me. I appreciate your indulgence, again, your kind words of support. But again, it's not about me. This is about, all of this has been about the work of the Lord. And that's about the work of the Lord from about 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, or whatever. Can I encourage you, and I offer to you, that there is work of the Lord to be done here this evening. If there are those here in the audience this evening who have not named Christ, who have not put him on in baptism, who have not made his word a part of their lives, why not? Will you join the family? Because the family is worldwide. I've learned that firsthand. It's something very beautiful. There is a worldwide family of people who want to rejoice with you. Will you allow them to do that? If you've stumbled, if you've fallen, taken that step, but have allowed the things of the world to enter your life, won't you correct them? You could do it from your pew this evening, or you can come forward while together we stand and while we sing.